While I still appreciate the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I went to the faith briefly thinking it Christian. It did not work out because I'd read the KJV and a few other versions. LDS history is an extension of and originated from some Judeans who left the Holy Land for a new beginning. It is said that Native Americans were an offshoot of those original Judeans who had their skin darkened by sin. I therefore assumed the Levites remain a fair-skinned group with impeccable works, thus they kept favor with God under the Old Covenant of the Law of Moses. I also assumed that under the First Covenant they followed the 613 mitzvahs. Those were often referred to in the New Covenant as works dictated by the law. Jesus the Christ was a Judean born under the law of Moses but ushered in the fulfillment of the law in order to advance mankind to a mainly spiritual worship. By fulfillment, an example would be one taking out a loan, paying all the payments, but continue paying. When Jesus was sacrificed to pay for our past and future sins and arose on the third day, as promised, it was completed as he ascended into heaven and sat at the right hand of the Father. Reading Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, one can see the labor and reasoning of the Judeans in accepting the Gentiles. Gentiles were actually locked out of the faith of the Judeans by the laws of Moses. We are warmly accepted by the will of God under the New Testament. Should we return to the old, physical, ways of worship, we are saying that Jesus the Christ has died in vain. What I'm stating is, salvation is not a process. Salvation is by grace, not by labor. It is plainly stated throughout the New Testament. It was not till I read Ephesians chapter 2 verses 8 to 10 that I completely understood. The epistles to the Romans, the Corinthians, and others cemented my Christianity. I know now that one can only receive grace by faith. May each of you have your moment on the road to Damascus. Yes, Mormons consider themselves Christian. The answer to the closely related and more common question of, are Mormons Christian, is much more complicated. I'm no expert, but I was raised rigorously Mormon and then was married to a girl whose parents called themselves Independent Fundamentalist Baptist, so I saw much of the intersection of these two brands of Christianity and heard a lot of claims about Mormons not being Christian. I will use these two groups, born-again Christians and Mormons, to illustrate an important semantic difference that makes the question of who is Christian more complicated than either side likes to pretend it is. Born-again Christians often use the title Christian to indicate that a person is born again. They might mean, does this person qualify for salvation by our metric? The word Christian then becomes a sort of title bestowed on those who have accepted the free gift of salvation. Born-again Christians will sometimes use the phrase, he's not a Christian, to indicate that a person is not saved or does not subscribe to the beliefs the speaker espouses. Mormons do not treat the word Christian in the same sense. Mormons are more likely to grant anyone the title of Christian if they claim it. Mormons do not equate the word Christian with salvation and do not feel much of a need to protect the term from being used incorrectly. They see it as a more broad term. Thus, Mormons believe that Mormons are Christian, that Catholics are Christian, that born-again Christians of every stripe are Christian, that Russian and Greek Orthodox are Christian, and that the crazy guy down the street is Christian if he says he is. This question of who is Christian and who is not is significantly less interesting and less important to Mormons than are the specifics of what a person believes and how that person acts. This is because Mormons believe that salvation is a bit more complicated than simple acceptance of Jesus Christ as their personal Savior. Mormons also believe in additional requirements for salvation, and in a sense they believe in different levels of salvation. So, Mormons are not declaring that a person is saved by bestowing the title Christian on them. They are using the term Christian the way they might say, he's from Dallas, Texas. He's from Dallas. He's a Christian. He told me as much. When someone tells a Mormon that Mormons aren't Christian, the Mormon feels similarly to how a man from Texas might feel if you told him he was not from Texas. He'd say, what? That's not to say Mormons aren't interested in where they or other people or other groups stand in relationship to God. Instead of discussing whether or not a person is Christian to do this, Mormons use different and varying terms. Rather than saying, he's a good, solid Christian, they might say, he's a member, or, he's a strong member, and thus make reference to the person's habit of attendance at the Mormon Church in progression through various principles and ordinances of the Mormon Church, like baptism. Instead of saying, then he became a Christian, to indicate that a person took a big step toward God, Mormons might say, then he joined the church, by which they mean the Mormon Church. They will talk about a person being married in the temple, or having served a mission, all indications of being a good Mormon. If the person being discussed is not a Mormon, they will often still discuss the relative godliness of that person in these same works-based terms, as Mormons believe that these non-Mormon people who do a lot of good things will still end up with some degree of salvation. She's not Mormon, but she's just a wonderful loving person. So, in summary, Mormons use the word Christian to mean a person who says she is a Christian. It is a blanket term and easy to earn, so to speak. Mormons use other terms to describe and estimate just how saved someone or some group might be. Are Mormons Christian? Not in the saved by grace alone sense. But they claim Christianity as much as any other sort of Christian. Their Christianity is critically important to them, and as their doctrine is infused with faith in Jesus Christ as the only begotten Son of God, they definitely have as much claim to the title as anyone.